Man, it's starting to feel like all the interesting stuff in Rogue One happened before Rogue One. Maybe we need a prequel to Rogue One.
Prequels are never good. There's no such thing as a good prequel. Prequels are always a bad idea. The only thing worse than a prequel would be a prequel of a prequel. So why do prequels usually fail? The first and biggest reason, I think, is mystery box storytelling. We all know about this by now. There was the TED Talk. We all know that this is J.J. Abrams' claim to fame, is that every story is a mystery box. And boy, does that show in his oeuvre. Unfortunately, this mentality plagues works outside of just J.J. Abrams. It seems like most studios have this mentality. If the end is known, then the mystery of how the story will conclude cannot be the thing that keeps your audience hooked. But is not knowing the end really the thing that usually keeps us hooked? No. If that was true, you could never rewatch anything that you liked. I think it's really only prequels that stumble over this. Knowing the outcome is not actually unusual or specific to prequels. For example, history. Historical fiction. There are so many films and television shows that are about famous historical people, famous historical events. Some of the greatest films and television shows of all time are dramatizations of that kind. Titanic wasn't like, will the ship sink? Stay tuned to find out. Movies about King Henry VIII aren't like, will this wife be the one? Stay tuned to find out. Movies about the Civil War aren't like, which side will win? Stay tuned to find out. And there's the whole category of tragedy. This is a staple of tragedies, that you know or have a reason to suspect what the outcome will be. There will be a prophecy foretelling the ending, or an opening that will straight out tell you the ending. And Greek tragedies do this all the time, where the whole thing is that you're watching this person hear of their fate, learn of their fate, watch them try to evade that fate, and by trying to evade it, in fact, fulfill that prophesied destiny. That's the whole thing of tragedy. But, if J.J. Abrams saw a Greek tragedy, he'd be like, well, you already know the end. Can't have that. Gotta make it a mystery. There's plenty of films and television shows that start at the end, where the very first scene is the ending. And then the whole show or the whole movie is about how you got to that point. Okay, but let's talk about Andor. Andor doesn't make assumptions. An equally bad approach or mode of thinking for storytelling is that if the audience already knows this, well, then we don't need to spend time on the characters not knowing this. We don't need to spend time on the characters wondering about this, because the audience already knows this. Even if the characters wouldn't necessarily or don't necessarily, let's not bore the audience with the characters wondering about it. So prequels that are all about how did this event come to take place, or how did this character become who we know them to be? The bad ones will cut out possibilities for alternatives. The story is marching directly towards the point that we know that it will end. Or they'll write characters that kind of behave as if they already know the outcome, and kind of behave in a way that already assumes the things that the audience knows to expect, even though there is no real reason for the characters to already think that or already assume that. So for example, a character that we know is going to become a badass, they'll already kind of walk around like they are a badass, but without that being justified or earned yet, and the people around them also kind of treat them that way, again with no reason for this yet in the story. Or an event, and this is one of those how did this event come to pass? Maybe it's an event that doesn't really at all seem likely. Our characters wouldn't necessarily expect it to happen, but in this prequel, they kind of all do expect it to happen just because the audience knows that's where this is gonna go, so then the characters kind of, for whatever reason, do too, even though, again, there's no reason for them to. Or then they'll include, some self-aware dialogue where they'll have to kind of, lampshade that this thing is going to happen. Guy boarding the Titanic. This ship will never sink. It would take hitting an iceberg to make that happen. So Andor's characters are experiencing the events of this story with no foreknowledge. They don't know if they'll succeed. They don't know if they'll survive. And because we care about them, and because their behavior makes perfect sense for who they are and for the situations that they're placed in, their circumstances and the knowledge that they would possess in that given moment, then watching them experience these tense situations, even though we know the outcome, we know they will live, or maybe we know that they won't live, but it's nail-biting because we empathize with them, because the situation portrayed is realistic and they would be feeling that kind of tension. Good storytelling requires empathy. Subverting expectations is all well and good, but the reason that we care about watching these stories where we already know the outcome is because we come to empathize with the characters who are experiencing this in real time for them. Like I said in the beginning, if knowing the end ruined the experience of every story, you could never rewatch something. You could never reread something. If you're writing a prequel and you're thinking, well, no point making my characters wonder about this because my audience already knows this, so it won't be a mystery. That's bad writing. In fact, drama and tragedy often rely on dramatic irony, i.e., that you know, like not just because it's a prequel, that within the text of this story, you are told information that the characters do not have access to. And so you're watching them with more knowledge than they have, and you're watching them try to navigate this situation, and you already know that maybe the person they're talking to is lying to them, and they don't know it, and you're watching them really tensely because you know this, and you're hoping they'll figure it out, but you don't know if they will. In Game of Thrones, we spend a ton of time watching Ned Stark try to figure out the answer to a mystery that we already know the answer to. And it's not boring because, we already know, like, this is wasting my time. Like, who cares, Ned? We already know this. Like, don't show this. It's compelling because we know already. The fact that you're wishing you could reach through the page and, like, tell this character, no, like, this is the answer. This is the information you're looking for. You're so close. This is it. That's what makes it compelling. The fact that you're having that reaction. Like, that's good storytelling. It's not always, oh, it's gotta be a mystery. You having the answer and the characters not having it is compelling. Andor's characters are written as if no other Star Wars story exists. And I do not mean this in the sense of, like, it ignores canon. I mean in how it's crafting its characters. The characters don't act like they know about other Star Wars. And they are not written in a way that's like, well, we can't have them do that because that's been done, or we can't have them do that because of this other thing in Star Wars. Like, if it makes sense for the character to think this or do this, in the context of what they've seen, what they know, and who they are, it's irrelevant what other Star Wars says happens. This is what they're going to choose to do. It doesn't name drop just so that an audience member is going to go, oh, I know that name, even though in the scene, no one would care about that name. There's no point to bring it up. It's literally done for the audience. That never happens in Andor. It doesn't treat the events of Rogue One and of A New Hope as inevitable. We are shown the brutal world that Cassian and co. are occupying and living in, and how it's shaping them into the people they are and shaping them into the people that they will be in Rogue One. It doesn't feel like, oh, well, we're just like treading water until that happens. This is a believable arc for them, even if we know the ending. How did we get there? And in the scenes where we do know something that they don't, because of the larger Star Wars context, we are treated to precisely that kind of dramatic irony that I was just talking about. We watch them dismiss things that we know are really important, but they of course would dismiss it. And it's not at all ridiculous that they would dismiss it, because that would also be frustrating. If we're like, oh, well, if dramatic irony is what we want, well, then we're going to purposely have them not figure out the thing that you already know, because see, that's dramatic irony. No, you have them figure it out if it makes sense for them to figure it out. And you have them not figure it out if it wouldn't make sense for them to figure it out. But the fact that you already know, and watching them dismiss a thing that you know is really important, but you absolutely get why they would not clock it as being important, because there's no reason for them to. The only reason you're clocking it is because you have this extra knowledge that they don't have. That makes it compelling to watch. It's frustrating and it's tragic, and it's what is some of the best storytelling around, because you are invested in these characters and in their experience of their own lives and of their own world. And so because that feels like an authentic experience, that you don't see the hand of the writer in it. That's what makes it something that you care about, that you come to empathize with, that it does not matter that you know the end, because you are living in this moment with these characters. But of course, it's more than that. Not being a mystery box is kind of the bare minimum. If the only thing that Andor had done right was to not be a mystery box, it wouldn't be one of the greatest television shows of all time, and it is one of the greatest television shows of all time. That is not up for debate. Outside of Andor, Star Wars has been a grand, sweeping, good versus evil, capital G, capital E type of epic narrative. The chosen hero defeats the unquestionably evil bad guy, and we kind of assume that there's a lot of smaller things going on behind the scenes in order to have this great big empire and in order to have this great big rebellion, but that's not what the story is about. Typically, Star Wars stories have been about the main characters, and Andor is decidedly not about the main characters. And for the Empire to have the kind of reputation that it does, for it to be as powerful, for it to be as far-reaching, as effective, as inescapable as it is depicted to be in all of Star Wars, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that would need to happen. I think Andor is perfectly described by one of my favorite quotes from First Law. Evil turned out not to be a grand thing, not sneering emperors with their world-conquering designs, not cackling demons plotting in the darkness beyond the world. It was small men, with their small acts and their small reasons. It was selfishness and carelessness and waste. It was bad luck, incompetence, and stupidity. It was violence divorced from conscience or consequence. It was high ideals even, and low methods. Andor shows us both sides, the good guys and the bad guys. And Star Wars has traditionally done this as well. But Star Wars has usually, typically in the past, in the movies, done this mainly to sort of make the villains even more menacing. So showing Vader killing his underlings for not doing what he wanted, you know. It's to a degree cartoonish. Not so with Andor. So let's talk about Andor's villains. There are two big mistakes that I see over and over again in books, in film, in television, in badly written stories when people are doing villains. One is that you make the villains mustache twirling and lacking in depth or nuance. They are not believable. They are just villains for the sake of it, evil for the sake of it. They are there for our hero to defeat, and our hero need not lose sleep over defeating them and killing them and torturing them, because they are evil through and through, and so it's fine that they die. Or the other mistake is that villains are actually just misunderstood. That every seemingly bad thing that they've ever done, it wasn't their fault, or maybe actually it was justified, or maybe there's another side to this story and they're kind of the hero from their own side of things. Or, see guys, there are no bad guys, there's just different perspectives, there's just people, it's so great, so deep. Andor doesn't do either of these things, thank God. Because there are villains in Andor, make no mistake. Andor does not confuse humanizing with justifying. So let's talk about Dedra. Dedra Meero. Dedra works for the Empire. Dedra is ambitious and cutthroat, and she is clearly an antagonist, but she is depicted as a human being. Dedra has fought her way to the top in a male-dominated and extremely brutal system. One can presume that to get there, she has had to be twice as brutal, twice as cutthroat, twice as smart, twice as merciless. But we watch her crumble under the weight of that ambition. We watch that ambition consume her and become obsession. And we watch that obsession ultimately destroy her and destroy what little happiness she has carved out for herself. Watching this, the audience isn't gleefully cheering as the villain is taken down. It's tragic to watch. At no point are we expected to feel that Dedra is actually just a good guy who was misunderstood. She's just a good girl who was forced to do bad things. No. At no point is Andor making that case. There's no redemption arc. There's no from her side. But in her way, she is also a victim of the Empire. She has been chewed up and spit out by the Empire. And that's what makes it brutal rather than triumphant watching her fall. Cyril comes closer to a redemption arc, but not really. Not much. He's been kept in the dark about what's really going on, what he's really been contributing to vis-a-vis his work for the Empire. And when he learns what he's been helping them do, he feels some kind of way about that. But one is left to wonder, is it primarily that he feels badly about contributing to something that hurts people, or is he upset that he was lied to? He's upset that he wasn't told. But he does turn his back on the Empire in a critical moment, so he's saying farewell to safety. So again, he does feel some kind of way about this, but he doesn't suddenly lend a hand to the rebels. He's a human person. He doesn't feel nothing when he sees the people that he's been working with and lying to for all of this time. He, again, has this affects him. He's not a robot. Seeing the people he's so callously manipulated die, it affects him. But he's not one of them, and he's not suddenly seeing himself as one of them. And when he spots Cassian, he doesn't suddenly declare, oh, the rebellion was right all along, and, you know, I'm here to join the team. No, he succumbs to the same obsession and hatred that has guided him all along. His final act is to attempt to kill Cassian, even when he knows what the Empire is doing, even when he knows that maybe there's good reason for Cassian to be wanting to work against this. His own petty grievances, his own foiled ambitions are what drive him to the bitter end. And again, seeing him die, it's not, hey, down with the bad guys, because he has been depicted as a human person with human foibles and a lot of negative traits that would lead him to want to aggressively pursue a career within the Empire. But he is a product of the Empire. He and Dedra, as much as they are instruments of the Empire and instruments to inflict the horrible will of the Empire, they themselves, as I said, are victims of the Empire and products of the Empire. And people like this only exist in the context of something like the Empire. And then there's the heroes. There are heroes in Andor as well, but Andor does not confuse heroism with perfection. Luthen is a linchpin of the rebellion. He's devoted his life to furthering their cause. In order to work against them, he has often had to match them in brutality, willing to do cutthroat things. And this leads other characters and the audience to ask, at what point have you just become the thing that you were trying to destroy? Heroes are often portrayed as not being willing to compromise on their virtues, not being willing to compromise on their integrity. They're going to defeat the bad guys without compromising those things, and that's what makes them the heroes. In fact, they'll defeat the baddies through their commitment to these virtuous high ideals. Luthen is doing the dirty work to clear the path for the Lukes and the Leias to triumphantly defeat the enemies without compromise. He is willing to sacrifice his soul for a tomorrow that he will never see. And that darkness in him is not a complication on his heroism. It's not a bit of nuance, a bit of a blemish on his heroism. His darkness is what makes him heroic, but it's also what makes him tragic. Cassian, likewise, is not a Boy Scout who is committed to the rebellion from day one, committed to the greater good, just immediately rearing to go. Over and over, he questions whether it's worth it to be fighting for this rebellion. Over and over, he wonders whether he should be following Luthen at all, whether he should bother making any of this his problem. And just because he finally finds it himself to be committed to it one day doesn't mean that he doesn't walk that back the next and start to doubt again. He has doubts regularly. He has to constantly reignite his commitment to the rebellion. And knowing his fate in Rogue One, knowing what decisions he ultimately will make, knowing what his fate will be, it doesn't make watching him consider walking away over and over again a waste of time. Because we already know he's not going to walk away. We already know he's going to commit to the rebellion. So why are you wasting my time showing me him considering walking away? Because this is about a human person and what it takes for them to commit to this. And that person would probably consider walking away more than once. This show isn't relying on the mystery of, will Cassian join the rebellion? Stay tuned to find out. We know who Cassian is in Rogue One. What got him there? What did he have to sacrifice to get there? What doubts did he harbor? These are not less worthy questions because we know the outcome. Andor does have to walk a pretty fine line, a tightrope of sorts. It has a very narrow window in which to play, and there isn't a lot it can invent or change within that window without contradicting existing plot points. If the show wasn't as good as it is, I'm sure this would be cited as a reason. People would say, well, Andor had the impossible task of telling a story, would not in any way mess with the existing canon, so of course it failed. And yet Andor proves that that task is far from impossible. The world Andor builds for us feels more complex, more expansive, more multifaceted than any on-screen depiction of the Star Wars universe ever has. Where the films have typically kind of hand-waved the necessity for countless nameless, faceless individuals working tirelessly in myriad ways, Andor shows us those faces. It tells us their names, and it explores all those small acts that make the grand story possible. And because it makes you care about the characters, then it makes you care about the comparatively more mundane situations that they face. Luke gets to destroy the Death Star in a blaze of glory. But the tension, the danger, the fear, the hope, these are no less great for the individuals involved in the countless smaller successes and failures along the way. And seeing those smaller jobs, seeing the complexity of the machine that is the Empire, it makes the grand narrative of the main saga even more compelling. It makes it even more grand. The Empire isn't vaguely powerful. The Empire is specifically powerful. We have seen the day-to-day brutality of their methods. We have seen the horrors inflicted on ordinary individuals by the likes of Dedra. We have seen the 1,000 impossible odds the rebels faced before Luke ever had to make that 1 in a million shot. Rather than ruining the existing stories or making them less interesting by taking away their mystique or some such thing, Andor enhances every other Star Wars story by its existence. Like Luthen, it does the dirty work to build the dark and gritty universe that lies beneath the grand Skywalker saga. Cassian's story is what gives weight and meaning to Luke's triumph. Good storytelling trumps everything. The lesson to be learned from Andor is that it doesn't matter what narrative universe your story is taking place in. It doesn't matter what previously established canon or lore is constraining you. The questions you should be asking when writing your story are not, what will keep the audience hooked? What will surprise the audience? What will look super cool or epic? The questions that you should be asking, that Andor was asking, why are these characters here? How would these characters feel about this? What drives them? If this happened, how would they react? Focusing on surprises, on epic moments, as the primary directive when crafting your story is nearly a guarantee that you will fail in both. Moments are epic because they stand on the shoulders of the 1,000 well-crafted mundane moments that made you care enough to find the epic thing epic. Surprises are satisfying when you don't see them coming, even though they totally make sense. If you were brainstorming out of context epic or memorable lines that you would then find a way to shoehorn into your story, you would never in a million years write the line, "I can't swim." Did you love Andor as much as I did? If so, why? What's the main reason that you loved it? Do you agree with my assessment, or is the thing that you loved about it totally different? I didn't talk about it at all. But most importantly, will we ever see a Star Wars story on screen as good as this one ever again? I certainly hope so. Any pitches? Any parts of the Star Wars universe or the Star Wars story that you think should get the Andor treatment? I would love to know. And if you hated Andor, if you think it's garbage, if you think it's the worst Star Wars show or movie ever made, I would love to know.